Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in today. This is Kathy Arenzana, and today I'll be doing watercoloring with Distress Inks using a bunch of Honeybee Stamps products. I'll be using the Cosmos stamp set, the Beehive stamp set with the coordinating dies, the Hi Honey sentiment set, as well as the Scallop A2 honey cuts. So let's get started. So to get started, I am using a piece of Canson XL watercolor cardstock that I cut down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I'm stamping the flowers in VersaFine Onyx Black ink and embossing with clear embossing powder. So when I started this card, I didn't really have a plan. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and you'll see that I ended up cutting off most of, well, not most, but cutting off quite a bit. I have to admit that typically when I do stamping, I don't really have a plan. I just kind of start to play. However, since I've started recording what I'm doing, I've kind of had to change that up a little bit and think about what I was going to do. Otherwise, I would be editing videos for days and days. So for the watercoloring, what I did was I just kind of smooshed my Distress ink pads directly onto my Ranger craft mat. The colors that I'm using for the flower petals right now is mustard seed. Very quick, very easy. This was a technique that I used to shy away from because I never really had very good results. And I realize now that it was because I was trying to use cardstocks that weren't really made for watercoloring, and I tend to use too much water in most cases. And then I saw this video by Kelly Latavola, and she was using watercolor paper, and I kind of had one of those, oh, why didn't I think of that moments? Which, by the way, if you've not watched any of her videos, I would highly recommend them. She's absolutely amazing with just about everything that she does. So the center of the flowers I did with spiced marmalade. You can see how the water kind of started to bead up in the center there, and that is because the images are embossed. The embossing powder will actually resist the water and the ink. So I just did a quick dab with a paper towel and then hit it with my heat tool just to get that first layer of color dried. For the stems, I used peeled paint, and for the highlights there, from the center of the flower out towards the end of the petals, that is wild honey. I added that just to add a little bit of depth, particularly towards the center of the flowers there. So watercoloring is definitely, it's for me, it's to break out of my safety zone, break out of my little box, try something new. And the more I do this with my Distress inks, the more I like it. So I have a feeling that I'll probably be doing some more videos about that. For the background, I just wet the paper quite a bit. Being that I am using watercolor cardstock, it was quite nice that it held up to it and it didn't pill or do anything wonky other than warp, which that's pretty normal when you add that much water. The top there I used Broken China Distress ink, and the bottom there I'm using peacock feathers because I wanted it to be a little bit darker. And you'll see I'll dab the flower petals because I ended up getting some of the blue ink in there, which is another thing that I, kind of like about this watercolor stuff, because you can fix your mistakes pretty easily if you just add some clean water and then dab it up with a paper towel. It'll remove the color that you want to remove, and then you can always go back and add more color in. And I have to admit that doing voiceovers is a little bit weird for me because I'm very used to teaching in person. So I'm used to having people ask questions and be able to answer and kind of go off topic. And here it's really weird because I'm just kind of talking to my computer. But I'm getting used to it. I think with time it'll probably be a lot easier. Truly, this video has been sitting here about a week, I kept procrastinating on doing the voiceover simply because I never really have much to talk about. So there I just kind of spritzed some clean water over the background and then dabbed it up with the paper towel to give those little sparkles there, or the spots there. Now I'm mixing some water with Perfect Pearls. This is another little trick that I learned from Kelly Latavola, and it just adds little droplets of sparkle and shine. And the color of the Perfect Pearls is actually called Perfect Pearls. And then to add more dimension, I just splattered some peacock feathers over the background as well. And then dabbed around those flowers where they ended up with some blue spots in it. Just a dry paper towel, pick it up pretty good. For the sentiment, I really wanted to use Be Happy. I didn't want to cut my stamps. So I lined them up where I wanted to. I almost inked them and remembered that I needed to mask them. So I just used some sticky notes to block off the areas that I did not want to ink, and then inked it up really well, again using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Then of course you have to remove those sticky notes and put it over to the card and press down to get a good impression. I did stamp this a couple of times because I wanted to have it very black and very crisp. The important thing to remember is to put those post-it notes back to continue that masking. And normally I don't have an issue with cutting stamps apart, but for these stamps, especially the one on top, the full sentiment reads Just Because, I didn't want to have to cut that stamp into 3 pieces. Next, I added a couple of little bees from the Beehive stamp set. I placed them down where I wanted them to be. Then you'll see in a minute that I changed my mind on those little bees. Basically, obviously, I used the scalloped frame to cut that out, and just adhering this up with a whole bunch of foam tape so that it'll pop up on the card. And the card front is an A2 card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it is a top folding card. And once I got that down, I thought I need to color those bees. So I stamped them onto a scrap of 80-pound Neenah Solar White cardstock. And for the bees, I stamped them in Memento Tuxedo Black because I wanted to color them in with my Copics. I didn't do anything fancy, really. I just used one color, no shading or anything like that. For the bee bodies, I did Y08. And for their little wings, I did BG0000. After I was done coloring them, I ran them through my Gemini Junior and used the coordinating die cuts. And then I just glued them flat with Tombow mono multi-glue, whatever it's called. And of course I added sparkle to their wings using Stardust Stickles. And that is pretty much the whole card. Thanks for stopping by today, and we'll see you next time.